Hello there, and welcome to Dr. Greg and Monica, this time on nutrition, and specifically we want to talk to you today about milk.
Milk. Mm-hmm.
Lots of different kinds of milk, and when you go to the supermarket, and people are asking us all the time, there's cow's milk, there's almond milk, there's soy milk, now we even have oats milk, hemp milk, kefir is a new one on the market. So let's talk a little bit about some of the different types of milks that exist out there, some of the benefits, and potentially which might be more beneficial or not, which might you need or not need.
Now, the first thing though, really, don't be confused by the name. It's marketed as milk, but milk is what mammals use to feed their offspring. And it's really kind of a blood variation without some of the red cells and so forth, but very high in some of the nutrients. But the other milk that we're about to talk about too, it's really more, we take the various nuts, the various grains, or whatever it is you want to make the milk out of, scrunch them, grind them up a bit, add the water, so you end up kind of more with the juice. Marketed as milk, but just common thing, don't think of it as milk quite in the same sense because it's a very different food.
Well, if that's the case, let's talk about the animal base first, which is your regular
Real
cow's
deal,
milk.
yes.
So that's the real deal. And obviously your dairy milk, it has a lot of protein, it has a certain amount of vitamins, but it's also pretty high on some of its saturated fats. And for some that'll drink the whole milk, there's 2%, there's 1%, there's even skim milk. So just depending on what you want to do with it. It is quite high in protein and some of the vitamins, as we said, but when you start taking some of the fats out of it, that takes some of those other good elements along with. And many times you'll see in the supermarket, skim milk, so it has no fat, but it's fortified with vitamin B or other things. Well, those are vitamins that have been added back into it. They're not really the natural thing, are they?
That's like the word enriched, kind of, to take something out, take a whole bunch of things out, put a few things back in, and it's called enriched. But for all that though, the cow's milk, the thing to watch for, some people tolerate it very well, some not so much with the lactose intolerance. Other people, it makes some of it mucousy. They've seen that, so they just don't handle it all that well. Very individual, but a little bit is pretty nice. But depending on how much you can tolerate is whether or not you should have it for you.
Well, the biggest thing is people talk about calcium and, I need to drink my milk because it'll help me, especially in later years. I mean, children all do drink milk, but then there are a lot of different trains of thought that as we grow older, we don't need milk. And others say, you definitely do need the milk because you need that calcium. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, it's more we can drink it. Should we? You can get calcium from vegetables too. Some of those we've talked about in other broadcasts on. Should we versus can we? Little different thing. Personally now, I don't drink much of it, but I like a bit of coffee now and then, so I will add, it's more like a flavoring, just enough of those things I found with aging too, much less tolerant, younger in life I did, but again, it goes back to what's right for your genetic type, your body.
In doing a little bit of research for this, I actually did read, this was a study done a couple of years ago, and it talked about women even over the age of 50 who drank a lot of milk every day. There were slightly percentages higher of hip fractures, needing later on hip replacements than those who actually didn't drink milk. And how, your calcium, you can find a lot more calcium in things like spinach and other foods than in the milk or the calcium that exists in milk. And there's some other factors that might even hinder you. So those are things to look out for.
So I want to let you know the pluses and the minuses of all these things so you can make your best informed decision.
So let's go ahead with some of those other milks that exist. And there are quite a few. I mean, goat's milk is one that you don't hear too much about, but it is quite high. It has like 9 grams of protein per cup. It's, some of the cons to it are that it's quite high in the amount of calories. So it's a higher fat, but it is a great source of calcium there. Another one would be cashew milk. Once again, looking at some of the different kinds of nuts that exist there. Now, cashew milk is the lowest in the caloric option. So it's low fat, it's low carb. It's typically fortified with calcium and other vitamins. And some of the cons there are that it isn't as high in protein. So it's much lower in the amount of protein. Almond milk, I think I just had an almond a little while ago and it got stuck in there. But almond milk is one we hear a lot about. It's also low in protein compared to some of the other counterparts, but it does have a range of a lot of different nutrients in it. It comes sweetened, it comes unsweetened. And some of the great things about the almond milk is you'll get some of your magnesium, your selenium, your vitamin E, which can also improve the health of your bones, and it also has
Absolutely.
antioxidants with it. Some of the negatives when you compare it to things like cow's milk or soy milk, once again, just like the almond or the cashew, it is quite low in protein. We talked a bit about the cow's milk.
Cow's milk already. Mm-hmm.
One that is becoming very, very popular nowadays is something called oat milk. Have you heard much about oat milk?
Not much, no.
So,
like
as you
oats,
were saying, when we talk about these milks, this is not specific milk that is coming out, but it is made by soaking oats in water. It's blending them, it's straining them, and then that mixture, the oats, a lot of them come from Sweden, and it's gaining huge popularity over here. Some are organic, some are conventional. And one of the things you have to be careful, it is lower in protein, doesn't have many vitamins or minerals. It also contains more fat than some of the other milk alternatives. But some of the great things is that, it does contain some more of the B vitamins, and it's a good alternative for people who have nut and soy allergies. So that's a milk that you might want to consider, with that. Another one is hemp milk, and this is a new one that I hadn't heard too much about. It is a creamier, cholesterol and blood pressure friendly option for those out there. And it is made once again from the hemp seeds that are soaked and ground into the water. Some of the things that can be sweetened, unsweetened, when possible, don't go for sweetened options because that's just adding extra sugar. Now, the good thing about hemp seeds, they are packed with omega-3 acids that can help with cholesterol levels. It can also help with blood pressure, keeping all of that in check. They don't have too many calories, so that's a great plus for them. But the fat content is higher, even though some of that fat is, are those omegas. So anyway, that's that one. An interesting one is kefir milk, and some of you may have heard of kefir because it's a fermented milk that resembles a drinkable yogurt, and you'll see a lot of kefir when some people speak about yogurts. It can be made from cow, from goat, or even from sheep's milk. So it actually comes from these sources, from the animal sources. Now, some of the good parts about it is that it has that beneficial yeast from the fermentation, from that yogurty kind. It has probiotic bacteria. It's got protein, calcium, vitamin D, vitamin B12 as well. Now, the only negative in some of the things that I've read about or heard is that it can cause constipation, just depending, and or intestinal cramping if you're not used to it. So that's something to consider there. Before we continue, any points at all about some of these milks?
Just as far as the probiotic part, if it's good for your gut, it's good for you. Cutting edge research is showing what's called the gut biome, which is all the stuff, all the visitors, all the friendly bacteria that are supposed to live in our guts and help us digest. But the linkages are becoming amazing as far as if your gut is in good shape, your brain may be good, depression linked to deficiencies, astonishing, and no one thought. But that old adage, you are what you eat, seems true all the time. But if you've got something like the kefir, where it's got a decent probiotic in it, it has a double benefit.
Okay, here's the most hyperallergenic of all those milks, and that's rice milk, that we don't think too much about. It's quite low, very low in fat, but much higher in the carbohydrates. As I said, it is a dairy-free milk, and it's made from the boiled rice, brown rice syrup, and other brown rice starch. So some of the good things about that is that it does have high levels of magnesium that help control blood pressure, which is good. Some of the bad things, well, not necessarily bad, but it just doesn't contain as much calcium protein, of course, as the cow's milk. And you've got to be careful when it comes to, you don't want to add any sugars or anything like that to it. Coconut milk is another great one that we have heard a lot about, and it is very low in calories. So that's a great thing about coconut milk. I think only 45 calories per 8-ounce serving. So that's a good one. But coconut milk has no protein in it whatsoever, or hardly. So be careful about that. It's also high in saturated fats. But a lot of nutritionists argue that the saturated fats that it does have are part of the fatty acid chains that we do need. The one that I'm leaving for last is soy milk, because there's a lot of controversy with soy milk, and I think you'll be able to add your more than 2 cents when it comes to that. It is a complete protein, just like dairy milk, but it can affect hormonal balance, and that's where there are some issues with soy milk.
It's really that. Soy, it's basically will increase estrogen, and so it depends. There are some type of cancers that are kind of maybe not to be recommended because estrogen can boost that process along, which we don't definitely want. The flip side of that, some perimenopausal and menopausal women, maybe they find a benefit because they're getting a little more estrogen in their diet. They can do that in a natural way, but they can possibly use it and it can benefit them in that way. From people in the fitness community, soy used to be kind of touted as an alternate protein because it is a complete protein, but it's not as biologically digestible or in some respects as other types of proteins. But on the other hand, if you're looking for more the exercise perspective, estrogen can once again be a negative effect. So the recommendation would be limited quantities, I would think, unless you fall into one of those categories, or perimenopausal or menopausal, in which case you might be able to use it.
And once again, with any of those milks, I would say balanced and limited quantities. Yeah?
That's about right.
We'll see you next time.